Today I will be talking about diabetes, specifically type 2 diabetes. I'll be going over why this disease is so important, some risk factors that go into it, some prevention things that you can do in order to avoid it, and what a diagnosis entails for someone who has this type of diabetes. Diabetes has to do with the pancreas. So when there is a lot of blood glucose, the pancreas will produce insulin and signal the cells to take up that blood glucose in order to achieve normal levels. The opposite is true when there's not enough glucose in the blood. The pancreas can signal for the cells to release glucose into the blood. A person with type 1 diabetes has a pancreas that isn't producing insulin because the body destroys those cells that are producing the insulin. They still have a lot of blood sugar because of this, because the cells aren't taking up that sugar and leaving it in the blood. This differs from type 2, as you can see. Rather than having a failure to produce insulin, the body has actually just grown resistance to the insulin being produced. The body at first tries to produce more insulin in order for those cells to react, but eventually those cells fail to respond and the blood is left with high glucose levels. This can lead to all sorts of complications such as stroke, heart attack, different types of neuropathy, glaucoma, cataracts, and different artery diseases that can come from just having so much glucose that's in the bloodstream without the body getting rid of it. So some risk factors that go into type 2 diabetes are a lack of exercise, being overweight, having a family history of type 2 diabetes, and unhealthy eating. A lot of these can be controlled by the person who is at risk, but these are the ones that will cause diabetes to be more prevalent. Diabetes is very prevalent in the United States. About 1 in every 10 people is diagnosed with diabetes. As you can see by the graph on the right, those rates are increasing. And on the left, you can see that the most prevalent areas of diabetes in the US are in the southern region and in the east. Some symptoms of type 2 diabetes are excessive urination, having increased thirst, feeling tired, increased hunger. An interesting one is having dark areas of the skin in skin folds, such as around your neck or elbows, having weight loss, and having yeast or bladder infections. A person with diabetes has to have an A1C test that's 6.5% or above, and I'll explain what that is later. There also has to be 126 milligram per deciliter for a fasting blood sugar test, and 200 milligrams per deciliter or above for a glucose tolerance test. So a visit with a doctor might look like them checking those levels and creating a diagnosis plan, a plan for once a person has a diagnosis in order to help them maintain and live a normal lifestyle despite having this disease. They'll go over different forms of treatment that are best for that person individually. So like I said, an HbA1c test is the full name of A1C test. And this is just a test that shows how much glucose your blood is holding on to. The level for diabetes is having 6.5% or above, and that is what the A1C test is. So a person who has that 6.1% or above may be started on metformin, which is a medication that helps to decrease blood glucose levels. It works by targeting muscles and having them have an uptake of glucose, getting rid of those high levels in the blood. Another thing a person can work on to control those blood glucose levels are diet. A good diet for diabetic, an example of that would look like something like on this plate, having healthy fats, having vegetables, fruits, and having a good source of meat and protein. Having a balanced diet is best for a diabetic. Another form of treatment is exercising. It's recommended that we exercise for 30 minutes a day. And as you can see by this picture, it can be a lot of different forms. It can be sports, biking, walking, dancing. It doesn't necessarily have to just be running on a treadmill like so many of us picture exercise to be. So I work as a medical assistant, and recently we had a man come in, we'll call him Tom, and he was a younger man, but he was diagnosed with diabetes, specifically type 2, and he thought that this was strange because he was so young, but he was already starting to experience some complications from type 2 diabetes. In order to help Tom, we ran a bunch of tests and started him on some medication that would help him get those blood glucose levels into a normal range so that he would not suffer from some of the more severe complications that come with this disease. He had follow-up visits to check in with his health and was doing really well. Tom showed me that having type 2 diabetes is not a death sentence. He was still able to enjoy his time with his family, participate in activities. While he still continued to come in for checkups and keep up with his medication, he was able to find a lot of balance in his life, even though he had this diagnosis. It's important to know where you are at on the diabetic scale, whether you're in the normal range, pre-diabetic range, or diabetic range. In the pre-diabetes range, there can be a lot to be done in order to prevent a person from having the diagnosis of type 2 diabetes. And a lot of those different types of interventions we can do are just ways to prevent it. And that includes having a healthy diet, maintaining a healthy body weight, exercising regularly, quit smoking if that's an issue, limiting alcohol intake, and getting enough sleep. Honestly, just living a healthy lifestyle that's very balanced can help to prevent type 2 diabetes. In conclusion, type 2 diabetes doesn't have to be a death sentence. It is a very serious disease and needs to be taken control of and have action taken, but it doesn't have to be the end. A person can find total balance in their life even while battling this disease.